might have heard that the right brain is responsible for creativity. Good. Then let me tell you that that's a myth. There are actually multiple entire brain networks at work to create what we call creativity. And believe it or not, creativity has been decoded by neuroscience. We have a much better understanding of creativity in the brain than most people believe. And even better, science has discovered tools and protocols that you can use yourself to become more creative. Now that said, in this video, I will dispel the myths about creativity and show you everything you need to know about the neuroscience of creativity. So once you've watched this video, you will be a creativity expert and you will be up to date with the latest and most important science and practical tools to become more creative and to have more creative breakthroughs. Now, overall in this video, I will cover the 4-step process in the brain that is involved in creativity to come up with new ideas and evaluate them. And second, how the neurochemical dopamine helps you create more ideas. Then 3, of course, the exact brain regions and brain networks that work together to create what we call creativity. And 4, once you know all of that, I will show you how you can make use of this knowledge with tools and protocols to become more creative. Now, creativity, as a side note, also includes what the neuroscientists call insight, which is what you have most likely experienced yourself. Now, insight is one of those aha moments. For example, in the morning after you wake up, when the solution to a problem just pops into your mind all of a sudden. And many people also call this intuition, in fact. Now, if you're excited, please take a moment to smash those like and subscribe buttons so that we can build an army of neuroscience and high-performance enthusiasts on this channel together. And of course, if you liked it, please also share the video with your friends and those who could benefit from it. That said, just briefly as a quick side note, I'm also currently developing a neuroscience and psychology-backed high-performance course with one-to-one coaching by me personally to get you from zero to hero, to blow anyone else out of the water and to accomplish your greatest goals, whatever it takes style. And I plan to launch this course for a few selected individuals in January 2022 who want to get to the next level, who want to have a breakthrough, or who want to live a new and more balanced life. There will also be a 100% money back guarantee because I will personally ensure you will leave this course as your very best self. So you really cannot lose. And if you're interested for inquiries and to submit topics of your interest that I might incorporate into the course, and of course, most importantly, for significant discount, guys, just contact me before the end of December 2021 by email, which is nicholas.p.reich@gmail.com. And if you want more info about the course, just have a look at the video description. Spots are limited, so if you're interested, it's best to drop me an email now as soon as possible. You cannot lose. And that said, my name is Nicholas. I'm a neuroscientist, dementia researcher, as well as a high-performance and flow coach. And this is how creativity works in the brain and what you can do to boost your creativity to a higher level. First and foremost, let me talk about what creativity actually is. Now, the definition of creativity is that it is a set of cognitive processes that support the generation of some form of product that is both novel and useful. And this product that is generated, it could be poetry, it could be a piece of music, it could be a painting, it could be a specific design, a method, a business system, whatever. Creativity is not linked to a specific subject, but it's more a general process of creating something new. And in that context, most creativity research has been conducted in the field of musical improvisation, visual arts, creative writing, and lyrical improvisation. Now, that said, there are several processes in the step of creativity, so how creativity works. And the first step would be that you actively take in new information. And the reason behind that is to load your pattern recognition system. Simply put, it means that you need to give your brain raw material that your brain can use to be creative with. The second step would then be ideas. That means that your brain produces ideas, creative ideas, and there are several things involved in this step. The first thing that you need in order to produce those ideas is divergent thinking. I will explain what that is in a second. And what is also important to know is that dopamine plays a very important role in this process of idea generation, which I will cover in a minute as well. And moreover, there are two different brain networks involved in this process, which are the default mode network as well as the salience network. Again, functional, what this means, I will cover in a minute. The next step, the third step, would then be to validate those ideas. So all of these different ideas are produced, and there must be some sort of system that then looks at all of these ideas and validates whether these are actually useful or whether they are simply put bullshit ideas. And that is done by the executive attention network in your brain. Once again, how it works, I will tell you later. And finally, the fourth step then would be called insight. So insight is one of those sudden aha moments, and many people also refer to it as intuition. And you probably had it yourself. For example, when you woke up in the morning, when you were still all tired, not focused on anything in particular, and all of a sudden, the solution to one of your problems just suddenly popped into your mind. And again, this phenomenon is also called insight. And again, I will show you exactly how it works and how you can use it to become more creative. But first and foremost, let's have a look at step 2. That is how ideas are actually produced in the brain. Generally, what you need to know is that divergent thinking is mandatory for creativity. And to give you further insight, there are actually two ways of thinking. Now, the first way would be convergent thinking. Convergent thinking means that you have a set problem and that you look at everything that is related to this problem, so different solutions, different ideas, etc. And the goal of convergent thinking is to have a final conclusion, to select one answer that is then the correct answer. In contrast to that, we have divergent thinking, so there's more broad and open thinking, and it is basically the opposite of convergent thinking. In this case, you look at a specific problem or a question and you try to come up with as many different answers as possible. Now, to give you a more feasible example, to make it a bit easier to understand, let's say cooking. Let's say you ask yourself the question, what should I cook for dinner? Convergent thinking would mean that you now look at different options and you want to select one of them. That means that you might decide to cook a chicken curry. So again, you just want to have this one answer. You want to have one final conclusion. In contrast to that, you have divergent thinking, open-minded thinking. In this case, you would also ask yourself the question, what should I cook for dinner? But in this case, you try to come up with as many different dinner ideas as possible. You could cook a chicken curry. You could cook a burrito or quesadillas. You could cook a soup, whatever. You just want to have as many different ideas as possible. And again, this way of thinking, divergent thinking, that is the basis of creativity. We want to have as many ideas as possible. In addition to that, dopamine especially plays a very important role in this process of idea creation. And in fact, it all starts with novelty. That's what we have here. More precisely, it all starts with putting new information into your brain, with taking up new stimuli, new situations, new events. And this process of novelty, of getting novel information, is actually facilitated by curiosity. Why is that? It's actually quite simple because if you're curious about something, you're more inclined to go deeper. For example, let's say you are really curious about a certain subject, then you're more inclined to read into it. You're more inclined to grab a book and read into it. And since you read more, again, you will gain more novel information. So you pick up more novel information that then can be used for creativity, which is what you see in the middle here. So creativity is very simple, in fact. Creativity is that you link new information to the information that you already have in your brain. So you get new ideas and you connect them to the ideas that are already there. And in addition to that, what also plays an important role here is pattern recognition. And that is you find links between ideas. You get a new idea that might be linked to something that you already have. An example here could be a new cooking recipe. Let's say you learn a new sauce, and then you think about it. Hold on, I have this amazing dinner here, and I just learned this new sauce. I could combine the two and make a completely new recipe. And that is basically pattern recognition. That is how you become creative. That's how new ideas are created. And very important in this context here is also that both novelty and pattern recognition, when you find a link between two ideas, release dopamine in your brain. Now, the neurochemical dopamine, it actually has many different functions. One of those motivational, in fact. So if dopamine is released in your brain, you become more motivated. Again, it helps you to pick up more novel information. But most importantly, what dopamine does is that it also improves your focus. It improves your attention, and it improves pattern recognition. So what this in turn means is that once again, if you have better pattern recognition ability, it's easier for you to find links between ideas. It's easier for you also to sort out what ideas are bullshit, what ideas are good, basically. And that is also typically why good ideas tend to spiral. Because you get a good idea, you find some links between two ideas, dopamine is released in your brain, then dopamine makes it easier to find more links between ideas, makes pattern recognition easier, more dopamine is released in your brain, then that helps you to find more links and more new ideas, etc. Alright, next let's have a look at the brain networks that are involved in creativity, and that is important information for you that you can leverage to become more creative yourself. First and foremost, let me clear up with this myth that's out there, and that's the idea that the right brain is the creative brain, and that is simply not correct. It's a very simplified view of the brain. And yes, admittedly, it is true that the right brain and the left brain have specific focuses. So the right brain generally tends to be more holistic, looks at information as a whole. The right brain, for example, it is more creative. Once again, it's where ideas are generated. And the right brain is also generally responsible for intuition. So intuition is also involved in the process of creativity, as you will learn in a second. And then we have the left brain. The left brain tends to be more analytical. It seems to look more into details as opposed to the entire picture. And the left brain tends to be more logic. So that's where logic thinking seems to occur. For example, to solve problems. But once again, very simplified view. And the reality is that's simply not the case for creativity, because creativity is in fact the combined result of three brain networks that work with each other to create what we call creativity. And again, how it works, I will show you now. There are exactly three brain networks involved in creativity, and the first one would be on the left-hand side, the default mode network. Now, if you just look at this activity pattern that you can see here, then you can already see the red color, then you can already see that there is activity on the left and on the right brain side. So the idea that creativity is a right brain thing, already not true there. In any case, the default mode network is actually active when you're not doing anything in particular, when you're not focused. It's active when you're daydreaming, for example, when your mind is wandering, or when you think about other people. Now, there are several brain areas that are part of this default mode network. You don't need to know them. It's just for your information. That's why I listed them here. And this would include the medial temporal lobe, the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, the precuneus, and parietal cortex. Now, one specific brain area I want to point out here, which is my personal absolute favorite, is the precuneus, because the precuneus is a brain area where random thoughts are generated. And these random thoughts, they have no morality behind them. There's pretty much no inhibition whatsoever. It would be thoughts like, this guy's fat, or this guy's ugly, what the hell, stuff like that. So just the random thoughts, all of them are created in the precuneus, and that is in fact very important for creativity, because again, in creativity, we want to have as many different ideas as possible. Now on the right hand side, what you have, number 3, is the central executive network. It's also known as the executive attention network, and that is basically the brain area that allows you to focus, to pay attention to a selective task. It's also responsible for working memory. That's where you hold information. And again, just real quick, you don't need to remember these. The central executive network, it includes the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex, which is also where we make decisions. And in the middle, we have the salience network. Now, the main role of the salience network is to switch between the default mode network and the central executive network. So switch how that works for creativity in a second. And again, many different brain areas you don't need to remember. There will be the anterior insular, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, and others. There are only 2 brain areas I want to point your attention towards in the salience network, and that is the substantia nigra and the ventral tegmental area. Why do I mention these? Because the substantia nigra and the ventral tegmental area are the brain areas where dopamine is produced in your brain. And this is also why, as the name would in fact suggest, the salience network is very important for novelty and curiosity, because once again, it includes the brain areas where dopamine is produced in the brain. And if you remember from earlier, dopamine is what you need to find links between ideas. Now, what is actually the role of these brain networks in creativity? On the left-hand side, we have the default mode network. Now, generally, the default mode network is where spontaneous and self-generated thoughts occur, like the precuneus. Precuneus is the brain area that doesn't give a shit, as I like to call it, where you get all those random thoughts like, she's fat, or this guy is freaking ugly, without any moral. And again, we need those random thoughts to be creative. Other than that, the default mode network also pulls information from other brain areas, from long-term memory. That is why the default mode network is responsible for autobiographical memory, to pull back memories from your past. And it also creates memories of the future, so future thinking, basically. And the entire purpose of the default mode network is to create ideas, candidate ideas for you. And these ideas could be potentially useful information or useful ideas that, again, could be useful for you. On the other hand, we have the attention network, executive attention network. And the main role of this brain network is to help you pay selective attention to a task. It holds your working memory and is also involved in task switching. And the role of the executive attention network in creativity in particular is that it looks all of the ideas. It looks all of the ideas that the default mode network comes up with, all of the bullshit, you could say, and he sorts through it. So the execution attention network basically says, all right, this idea, bullshit. This idea, maybe. This idea, really good. So it basically looks at every idea, evaluates it, and then looks at whether this idea is useful for you and your future goals. Most importantly is that the default mode network and the executive attention network are antagonistic. When one is active, the other one is shut off. So it makes sense. Default mode network is daydreaming. Executive attention network is when you're focused on something in particular. So of course you can only be daydreaming or you can only be focused on something. And that is where the Alliance network comes into play, because the Alliance network constantly switches between both networks in order, again, to make you more creative. You come up with new solutions, then you look at this at individual ideas, you come up with more solutions, you look at the individual ideas, and again, the Alliance network allows you to do that by switching back and forth. And there's actually a really cool study that was done in 2018, and this study concluded that creative individuals have stronger connectivity of the three brain areas I just showed you. To look into this a bit in more detail, with more detail, you can see it here. It doesn't really matter what exact brain areas are involved here, so you don't need to remember that. The only thing you need to take away from this image is that on the left-hand side, you have highly creative people, and the brain connections they have, they look completely different from people with low creativity. Now, what the study did in particular is that they did fMRI scans of 163 individuals. Now, for you to know what is fMRI, now fMRI, it measures brain activity and it does it based on blood flow. So actually it doesn't measure activity, but it measures blood flow. Why is that? Because generally, if you have an increase in blood flow in a certain brain area, then you also have an increase in brain activity, likewise in this area. And that is why, again, you can just monitor blood flow to know whether there's high or low activity in a brain area. Now, that aside, what they let those 163 individuals do in this study is the so-called divergent thinking task. Now, this is actually very common. It's commonly used to assess creativity. And it's actually very simple, because in this divergent thinking task, what the participants had to do was find a new use for common objects, come up with many different uses as possible. For example, they were given a hammer, and now they needed to come up with what the hell they could do with this hammer. So the more ideas they got for how they could use this hammer, the more creative they were. So that is basically the test they used in these studies. And again, they found out that highly creative people, they had stronger brain connections between the default mode network, the Alliance network, and the executive attention network. But what was really impressive about this study is that they could look at the brains, they could just take a brain scan of a person, and based on this brain scan, and based on the connections between those three creativity brain areas, networks, they could actually predict how creative a person was. It's insane. So again, the stronger the brain network connectivity, the stronger the default mode network, the Alliance network, and the executive attention network were connected, the more creative those people were. Now, on to the next step, which is insight. Now, what that means in a second. Generally, insight occurs when you are non-focused. So when you don't have anything particular in your mind, and when you're relaxed. So it's basically when your default mode network is active and you're daydreaming. And what is also a signature is here that you have alpha brainwave activity in your brain. Now, what the hell is alpha brainwave activity, you might ask? To give you a bit more insight, just briefly, we have different brain waves in our brain, and it's basically how fast your brain works. First and foremost, we have alpha brainwaves. Now, alpha brainwaves, that's usually when you're deeply relaxed, when you're daydreaming, and again, when you don't do anything in particular. For example, just after waking up and you're still foggy. Next would be beta brainwaves. It's a bit faster, and it is when you pay attention to something. It is when you walk through your daily lives, when you focus on working, for example, etc. And with gamma. Gamma is super fast, and what gamma in particular does is that it's involved in information processing. It's also involved in memory and paying attention. Now, the cool thing is there's actually a study that was done in 2014, and they figured out that inside, so just before you get one of those aha moments popping up in your brain, the solution just pops out of nothing, you get a burst of alpha wave activity. So alpha brain activity goes up extremely, and it is followed by gamma. So gamma is this super fast wave that is involved in information processing. And they specifically saw this increase in alpha wave activity in the occipital cortex. Now, that is just some background information for you, but it's really interesting. So if you, again, paying attention here will give you more insight into how this entire thing works. Generally, the occipital cortex is the brain area that's involved in what you see. It's also the place in the brain where you assign meaning to what the hell you see. For example, you see a woman, and the occipital cortex interprets it as woman. And it's also the brain area where you remember anything that you saw. Now, generally what I found in this study, very interesting, is that you have this increased alpha brain activity in this occipital cortex. And funny enough, when you have increased alpha activity in the occipital cortex, then it means that visual information input is blocked. Now, why is that? Now, they theorized that is actually because blocking visual input then allows your occipital cortex to pull information from other brain areas. So it allows you to pull information from your long-term memory. And in this particular case, the concept of creativity, it allows you to pull the subconscious solution that is formed in the temporal lobe to your conscious mind. Now, I will not go into any further detail here. The only thing that you need to remember is that you need alpha brainwave activity for insight to occur, for the solution to pop into your mind, and again, for this creativity to occur. And that has actually been proven in studies. That's a really cool study, once again, that was done in 2015. And again, the study confirmed that boosting alpha brainwave activity actually increases insight and creativity. And what they did here in particular is that they took 20 healthy participants and they put a little head device on them in order to do transcranial alternating current stimulation, TACS. Freaking complicated word, but what it means is that this little device that I put on, it was actually used to apply a little electrical current in the brain, or to the brain of these participants through electrodes. Now, apparently this technique is painless, and what it's supposed to do is boost brainwave activity, so you can boost selective brainwaves. Again, I've never tried it myself, probably never will. Don't like messing with my brain in this case, but it's very interesting in fact. And again, what they showed is boosting those alpha wave activities selectively boosts creativity, it boosts insight, it boosts getting those ideas. Now, as a little side note, that's not necessarily related, but also interesting for you to know in the context of creativity, and that is there are certain cognitive abilities that they constantly increase your creativity. So you can boost your creativity by higher fluid intelligence, by working memory capacity. The higher working memory capacity is, the more creative you are. And verbal fluency. Why is that? Now, fluid intelligence, that's actually the form of intelligence that you can train. And simply put, it's your problem-solving ability. So it's your ability to think speedily and to reason flexibly, again, to solve a problem. And the reason why this is useful for creativity is because the higher your problem-solving ability is, the higher your capacity to think speedily and reason flexibly is, the better you are at assessing ideas. So once again, you have these hundreds of ideas, and if you're smart, basically, if you can think flexibly, then it's easier for you to go through idea through idea through idea, and to pull out the few ideas that are actually really good. So it makes you more creative. Likewise, working memory capacity. If the more information you can hold in your brain, the more creative you are. That is because you have more raw material to be creative from. If you have 5 things in your working memory, then you can pull or be creative based on these 5 things. But if you have 10 things in your working memory, then you have 10 ideas, 10 things that you can be creative with. So again, higher working memory helps you to be more creative, etc. Now back to the entire creativity thing. What you must understand in this context is that stress hormones block creativity. Stress hormones block divergent thinking, so open-minded and broad thinking. Generally, stress releases the so-called stress hormones cortisol and norepinephrine. And these can enter your brain and they switch your brain into the fight and flight response. And the fight and flight response means that your brain narrows down the options. It becomes more narrow-minded to only 3 things: fight, flight, or freeze. For example, let's imagine you meet a nice, beautiful saber-toothed tiger 2 meters in front of you. In that case, your brain doesn't care about your dinner anymore. Your brain doesn't care about being creative anymore. The only thing your brain cares about is to get the hell out of there, to survive this, to not be eaten by the freaking saber-toothed tiger. And again, that's why your brain and the stress hormones trigger this fight and flight response. You can either fight the saber-toothed tiger, probably not a good idea. You can either run away, probably a smart idea, or you freeze. Literally, you're so frozen in fear that you cannot move anymore. And that's problematic for creativity, because again, with creativity, we need broad thinking, we need divergent thinking. Whereas when you're on the fight and flight response, your thinking narrows down. You only think about fight, flight, and freeze. Again, not useful for creativity. If you want more insight into how the stress hormones affect your brain and what they do in your brain in particular, in fact, stress hormones make you literally stupid, I'm not kidding, then check out the video I linked you in the description, because I made a separate video about, again, the effect of stress hormones. That said, that's probably what you've been waiting for. Science has given us tools and protocols that we can use to improve creativity and make use of all of the knowledge I have showed you earlier. The first thing you can do is to schedule what I call curiosity time. Now, this means that you take 10 to 30 minutes a day to read. For example, you could read 25 to 50 pages non-fiction, and the idea behind that is to load your pattern recognition system. Because again, creativity, in order to become creative, you need to load your brain with ideas. You need to put in new information. And the way to do this is by being curious, by just reading, by putting new information into your brain actively. And it's also very important in this context that you not just read into the field you're interested in, but also in related fields or fields that are not related at all. For example, I'm a neuroscientist. I could, of course, read into neuroscience, always good. But in order to improve my creativity, it also makes sense to read into other things such as physics, maybe even strength training or cooking. Why? Because again, then you get novel input, novel information into your brain, and this novel information will help you to make connections with what you already know, and then increase your creativity as a consequence. What you can also do is open sense meditation. Now, studies have shown that 12 to 20 minutes of open sense meditation increases creativity. It gives you the cognitive benefits. And what it does in particular here, open sense meditation, this form of meditation increases divergent thinking. Again, we want that. We want this broad thinking, this non-focused thinking, so that we come up with as many ideas as possible for creativity to happen. Open sense meditation also increases default mode network activity, so daydreaming, and it increases alpha wave activity in your brain. That is also helpful for insight. I will mention that in a second again. The third protocol you can do is that you generally need to reduce stress. Again, stress blocks creativity. It blocks divergent thinking by narrowing down your thinking. We don't want that. So in order to flush out the stress hormones out of your body, we can do mindfulness practices. Open sense meditation, as I said, wonderful method. Other than that, you can do yoga, you can do walks, you can do a cold shower, heat therapy, naps, etc. Because all of these things have been shown to decrease stress and norepinephrine levels in your body. And also, again, all of these mindfulness practices, they switch your brain into alpha wave state, so they switch your brain into a more relaxed state. And again, you need this relaxed and daydreamy state to be creative and to get insight. Again, insight occurs when you are relaxed. And again, as a more specific protocol, what you can do is disengage on purpose. So that means that after intense mental effort, let's say you've been working on a problem for 2 to 3 hours and it's driving you nuts, what you should do is consciously step back. Leave the problem, step back. Because remember, the insight, the aha moment, and the solution, it pops into your mind when you're not actively thinking about it, when you're relaxed. So you can, knowing that, use this information to your advantage and schedule, for example, light physical activity that doesn't have any high mental effort involved in it to selectively get this insight after a intense mental effort. And lastly, that's the method that I want to share with you, a really amazing one that I use myself, in fact, and that is a way to delegate problems to your subconscious mind so that your subconscious mind finds a solution for you. And what you do in this case is that you identify a problem, a challenge, or a decision that you're unsure about, and then you write this problem, challenge, or decision down. Ideally, you do that in the evening, and it could be anything. For example, should I hire a new employee to help me in my business? It could be, what could I do to improve my strength gains in the gym? Or it could be, how can I both manage work and looking after my children tomorrow? I have no idea how the hell I should do that. Once again, whatever it is, as long as it could be any question that you don't know the answer for yet. And then important, you schedule a time to get back to the problem. So you don't solve it now, you schedule a time to get back to it later. So it should be minimum in 4 hours, ideally the next day. And then forget about it. Forget about the problem entirely, because again, the goal is that your subconscious mind comes up with a solution for you. And at a scheduled time, again, let's say you want to get back to the problem 10 a.m. the next day. It is 10 a.m. the next day. Then you sit down, you grab a piece of paper, you note down the problem again. Let's say, should I hire a new employee? And yeah, then you just grab a pencil and you start writing whatever instinctively pops into your mind. And the cool thing is, it will happen. So you will experience or receive the solution normally a few minutes after you're in. And even cooler, this insight, this aha moment, or the sudden solution that just pops into your mind, it can even occur before you actually get back to the problem. Again, insight occurs when you're not focused on anything in particular, when you're relaxed and daydreaming. So once again, the solution is there and it will come. And that concludes the video. So thank you very much for watching. And if you enjoyed the video and if you want to support the channel, please like, subscribe and share the video with your friends and those who could benefit from it so that we can build an army of neuroscience and high performance enthusiasts together. Now, to give you a brief summary of the key takeaways from this video, and that is the fact that creativity is a 4-step process. And this 4-step process involves that you first load your pattern recognition system by taking in new information. You could, for example, read non-fiction every day in order to give your brain raw material for ideas, for creativity to happen in the first place. The second step is that ideas are produced. And these ideas are produced by divergent thinking and the default mode network in your brain. Now, the default mode network is active when you're daydreaming, when you're not focused on anything in particular, and when you glide from one idea to the next. In addition, whenever you make a link between two ideas, or when you discover something new, novelty, then dopamine is released in your brain. And again, dopamine in turn, it will increase your attention, your focus, and make pattern recognition, so finding links between similar ideas even easier. And this is why good ideas tend to spiral. This is why you get one good idea after another. You find a link between two ideas, dopamine is released, dopamine helps you to find more links between ideas, etc. Third is that the ideas of the default mode network, so again, the default mode network is active when you daydream and it presents and produces many different ideas. These are in fact evaluated by the executive attention network. Now, the executive attention network is active when you focus, and it looks at all of the ideas by the default mode network to sort out the bullshit ones and to pick those that are good, that are actually useful for you. That aside, the default mode network and the executive attention network, they oppose each other. So when one is active, the other one is switched off. And that is where this alliance network comes into play, because this alliance network, it constantly switches between the default mode network and executive attention network. And again, studies have shown that the most creative people in the world, they have better connectivity between the default mode network, executive attention, and alliance networks. And then fourth, of course, you receive an insight. Now, an insight is the sudden aha moment when a solution to a problem just pops into your mind out of the blue. That is when you're mentally disengaged, non-focused, and when your brain is in alpha wave state, alpha brainwave activity. That is when you get the insight. And usually you actually get such an insight directly after you wake up, but also whenever you don't focus on anything in particular. It could be when you do exercise. It could be after a meditation session, when you got all of thoughts out of your head. Now, keeping all of this creativity knowledge in mind, tools and protocols that you can use to increase your creativity are, of course, as I showed you earlier, to schedule 10 to 30 minutes curiosity time, just read into nonfiction, to give yourself idea, to load your brain with novelty, to load your brain with novel information that you can then use to be creative. You can do open sense meditation for 12 to 20 minutes, because that will improve divergent thinking and switch your brain towards alpha brainwave activity that you need for the insight to occur. Then you can use mindfulness methods, for example, yoga, a walk, cold showers, heat therapy, naps, whatever it is, to flush out stress hormones out of your body that block creativity. And of course, to get yourself into this daydreamy state that helps you to get the insight. Fourth You can schedule light physical activity after you've done intense mental effort, and this is in order to come up with a solution. For example, when you get stuck working and you just can't find the solution, do some light physical activity, because that will help you again for the insight to occur. And lastly, very useful, you can use the MacGyver method to delegate any problem, any decision you're not unsure about, etc., to your subconscious mind, so that your subconscious mind finds a solution for you while you're not thinking about it. All right, that's it. It's quite complicated. I realize that I've covered a lot of different information and ideas, so please feel free to rewatch the video as needed and post any questions, so things that are unclear for you, in the comments. I read what you guys say and I will get back to you as soon as I can, or I will address the answers in a future video. That aside, as I mentioned in the beginning, if you're interested in being part of a neuroscience and psychology backed high performance online course with one-to-one coaching by me personally to become your very best, whatever it takes, just drop me an email at niklas.peterreich@gmail.com. And again, by emailing me, you can ask whatever questions you may have, you can suggest topics that you want to have covered in the course, and most importantly, you will reserve a slot and receive a significant discount. Once again, for more information about the course, see also the video description. I plan to launch this course for a few selected individuals in January 2022. There will be a 100% money back guarantee, and that is because I will personally ensure that you will leave this course better than ever before. So you really cannot lose, guys. Lastly, now that you're an expert in creativity, make sure to use the creativity tools and protocols that neuroscience has discovered for you. That's some cool shit. And it's about time that you come up with that brilliant solution to crush those nagging solutions that you may have, those nagging problems that you might have, and to come up with this innovative idea that could transform your career and life. Okay. And all that's left to say is, have a nice week, have a creative week in front of you high performers, and I will see you in the next video.